Thank you very much. It's a real honor for me to be here with you. One of the most exciting things I have had the experience of this last few days is to see the strength of the Indian American Muslim people. Here in this hotel, I felt like I was back in India. We lived in India for a year. And the people who have come here, you people who have come to America from India, are enriching our country. We are so grateful that you have come here. You are making America what it should be, which is a pluralistic democracy, a country from which you have come, which was originally founded as a pluralistic democracy, but which is now under threat from the Modi government. We also, here in America, have a pluralistic democracy that is under threat. As you know, in both cases, Islamophobia was one of the biggest causes of this fear and this neo-fascism that began to take over the United States under Donald Trump and that is already taking over India with Narendra Modi. We must stop it. When India became independent in 1947, its founders adopted a secular constitution for a pluralistic society. They rejected Hindu nationalism. Gandhi and Nehru's vision of India's multicultural future guided the Congress Party, which ruled India for most of its first 4 decades. Pakistan, on the other hand, was founded as a homeland for Muslims. Until the Pakistani Army's genocide in East Pakistan, in Bangladesh in 1971, Pakistan united 2 territories separated by 1,000 miles. That was a mistake. Today, though, there are still more Muslims in India than in Pakistan. 200 million, 12% of the India's population of over 1 billion. Only Indonesia has more Muslims. Islam is a great religion, a great faith. It is a faith that is true to the worship of the one God. Mahatma Gandhi was heartbroken at the partition of India and the separation of Pakistan, and at the Genocidal Massacres of 1947. Some of his most famous fasts were to stop the killings. But Gandhi's most virulent enemies were not separatist Muslims. They were the Hindu extremists of the RSS. They advocated creation of a militant Hindu state, a Hindu Rashtra. On January 30th, 1948, one of these extremists murdered Gandhi while he was on his way to prayer. At his trial, the murderer claimed that Gandhi's, quote, consistent pandering to Muslims had left him with no choice. He went to the gallows singing, "To the motherland, the land of the Hindus." Golwar, the supreme leader of the RSS until 1973, expressed the tenets of Hindutva, the Hindu extremist ideology, in his manifesto, "We, or Our Nation Defined." In it he said, and I'm quoting, "Hindus could profit from the example of the Nazis, who they had manifested race pride at its highest by purging Germany of the Jews." And he declared Muslims and Christians in India to be, quote, invaders. Well, leaders of the RSS have now taken over India. The Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, the RSS's political wing, has dominated the government in New Delhi since 1998, when Vajpayee became India's prime minister. And today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has built his political support on Islamophobia and made Hindutva the effective ideology of the Indian government. One of the government's chief advisors, K.S. Sundarshan, the leader of the RSS, said in 1999 that an epic war has begun between divine and demonic powers for world supremacy. He predicted the ultimate victims would be Hindu nationalists. It sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? Where here we are in the U.S. where Christian nationalists are trying to take over the United States. The RSS now controls the biggest Indian political party, as well as schools, trade unions, cultural societies, religious groups all over India, and they are here in the United States too. They run the camps of the Bajrang Dal, where young Hindu boys are taught the ideology of Hindutva, and where hatred and fear of Muslims are openly advocated. Now, conferences are being held, religious conferences in India, in which genocide is literally called for by the people in the conferences, in which mass murder is advocated against Muslims. That is why Genocide Watch has declared a genocide alert for India. In fact, we declared the first time that there was a genocide alert for India in 2004, after the Gujarat massacres. Because we use a model of the processes that lead to genocide, we often predict genocides long before they happen. And because each of these processes can be stopped in its tracks, genocide can be prevented. But I want to talk to you today a little bit about one of those processes, and that is what I call religious centering, about sacred centers in India and how we see this process unfolding. Most cultures create places of worship where they venerate their gods or other sacred symbols. Places where events in the lives of sacred heroes occurred become venerated. Often churches, temples, or mosques are built over them. In Hinduism, in fact, they even believe that some of the gods were born in these places. But the idea is to culturally contain these sacred forces, which are otherwise dangerous. By being contained, people believe they can control them. That's why you'll find some of these sacred places over some of the most famous religious centers, such as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and the Great Haram Mosque enclosing the Kaaba in Mecca. I remember walking up Mount Sinai with my wife when I was much younger and much stronger, and we came to the place where it is commonly believed that the burning bush that Moses saw, was burning. Well, guess what? They had built a shrine over it to control it. Sacred forces are powerful. They're considered dangerous. The Christian Crusades to recapture Jerusalem showed that men of faith will even commit genocide to retake lost ownership over such centers. They're especially likely to do so when they feel their own culture is under siege, as Christian Europe was, they thought, from Muslims, and as Hindus now feel they are from Muslim and Christian civilizations. So this force of centering, is something that we're now witnessing again here in India. In fact, in 1989, the RSS and the BJP, led by L.K. Advani, started a campaign to build a Hindu temple in the North Indian town of Ayodhya over what they believed was the birthplace of the god Rama. There was only one problem, as you know. A Muslim mosque, the Babri Masjid, already occupied the site and had since the 16th century. The RSS claimed that the Mughal Emperor Babur destroyed an ancient Hindu temple to build the mosque, and that was their justification. When, in fact, in 1992, BJP leaders organized a mob of Hindus that demolished the Babri Masjid while shouting "Death to Muslims." At least 1,700 people, most of them Muslim, were murdered in the so-called riots that followed. But these communal riots were actually organized genocidal massacres that intentionally targeted victims because of their religious identity. In March of 1993, Muslim terrorists retaliated. The RSS controls the World Hindu Council, which has sponsored the carving of foundations and columns for this Hindu temple that they're building on the site of the Babri Masjid. And regularly, trainloads of Hindu militants would descend upon Ayodhya to demand that the construction commence. For years, they were blocked by court order, but now they are free to build. They are taking over another religious center. And the next thing they will do is try to take over mosques in Varanasi, in Mathura, and other places in India. As you know, in 2002, February 27, 2002, a train car burst into flames in Gujarat, and 59 people, mostly women and children, were burned to death. Who set the fire remains a matter of dispute. But what is clear is that it became the signal for organized genocidal massacres of Gujarati Muslims that took over 1,000 lives, 1,000 Muslim lives. An independent citizens tribunal led by former Chief Justice Krishna Iyer investigated the mass murders. And it noted that the killers used computer printouts of addresses of the places occupied by Muslims to identify their targets. This was organized. Police officers stood by while thousands of Hindus rampaged through Muslim enclaves, raping, shooting, stabbing, looting, and burning. The killers clearly expressed their genocidal intent. They said, kill them all, destroy their society, finish off all the Muslims, don't have mercy. Police officials said that the BJP party instigated the mobs. As one of them said, this was not a riot. It was a state-sponsored pogrom. In spite of this, campaigning on hate and fear, the BJP won a landslide election in December 2002, and Gujarat's chief minister in 2002, who has been a RSS militant most of his life, Narendra Modi, was chief minister. Now, in 2014, he was elected Prime Minister of India. His government is applying the RSS Hindutva ideology to its policies. So let's look at the stages, at the processes of genocide that are underway in India and why Genocide Watch has declared a genocide alert for India. The first stage in every genocide is classification, and India is classified. There are Muslims, there are Hindus, there are Christians, there are Jains, there are people of other faiths, but the main thing is that there is an in-group and an out-group. And what Modi is trying to do is trying to other the Muslims. He's trying to say these are not really Indian people. They're invaders. The second stage is symbolization, in which the names and the residents and other symbols of the identity of these people are noted They're sometimes made to live in separate quarters. Muslims are discriminated, that's the third stage, in the Citizenship Amendment Act, in non-prosecution of lynchings and other crimes committed by Hindus against Muslims. They are, fourth stage, dehumanized. RSS extremists refer to Muslims as invaders. The Home Minister has even called Muslims termites. Does that remind you of Rwanda, where they called the Tutsis cockroaches? Or of Germany, where they called the Jews vermin? It should. The fifth stage, organization, is also present. The RSS is highly organized. Not only is the RSS organized, but the whole Indian state is organized. We can see it in Kashmir, where 600,000 Indian troops occupy the only Muslim-majority state in India. The next stage in the process of genocide is polarization, and that is exactly what is underway in India. The attempt is to polarize the society so that if you're not with us, you're against us. So in that case, we have a case where the Muslims are considered to be outside the group that are truly Indian. We also then have preparation, in which the census in Assam under the National Registry of Citizens Act is preparing for the expulsion of over 2 million Muslims who fled Bangladesh in 1971. We then have persecution, and the persecution of Muslims is reflected in termination of Kashmir's autonomy, the lockdown and occupation of Kashmir, the expropriation of Muslim property and destruction of property by bulldozers. We have all of these stages, in other words, that lead up to actual genocide. There are also strong counterforces in India, and that is what we must mobilize. This is a battle that has to be fought in India. It has to be supported by you, because you, as expatriates, have the power and the finances to help to finance the opposition to this growing Nazi tendency in India. Now, there can be also, of course, international pressure placed on the Indian government. Along with the gentleman who's going to speak right after me, I believe, when we found out that Narendra Modi was coming to the United States to give a speech in Florida back in 2005, I believe it was, we called up Mary Ryan, who was the chief consular officer at the State Department. We said, this man is a genocidist. He is guilty of crimes against humanity. You should terminate his 10-year visa. And she did. He was excluded from the United States. I'll finish. Yes. So there are forces that we can use against this. Right now, we can't exclude him because he's the Prime Minister of India. But what I'm doing is I'm outlining some of the ways we need to place international force, international pressure on the Indian government. So far, our government has been unwilling to speak out against this. We must change that. We must get the U.S. government to speak out. In Ahmedabad, the Muslims of the Jurapura enclave refer to the road that divides them from the Hindus as the, quote, border. It ends in a green field called Unity Ground, where Hindus and Muslims used to play cricket together. It was the dream of Mohandas Gandhi that the sacred centers of India would be open to people of all faiths, that the borders that divide them would end in a unity ground. May Gandhi's dream again become India's.